The HOA president thought she could steal my land to build 67 rental homes. But she didn't just take my field. They bulldozed the oak tree where my wife's ashes are buried, then had the nerve to fine me for their construction. She stood there, smirking, waving a bogus map she claimed I signed. What she didn't know was that I had an old locked box hidden under my workbench, a secret that was about to make me her new landlord. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments, because this revenge is about to get epic. And if you believe homeowners should always win against a power-hungry HOA, smash that subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss the look on her face when she gets my first invoice. It all started with a line in the grass. A young man in a cheap suit, Tommy Chalmers from the HOA, stood on my side of that line, holding a clipboard like it was a shield. He had the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, Mr. Rowe," he said, pointing his pen at the back 40. "Just a heads up, this area is now considered part of the HOA Greenbelt. We'll be starting preliminary work soon. I'd lived on this land for 30 years. I dug the footers for my house with my own 2 hands. I know where every pipe, every wire, and every property stake is because I put them there." I just laughed. "Son, my property line ends at that old stone wall way back there. You're about 100 yards short." He just kept smiling that plastic smile. "Our new survey maps show otherwise. It was part of the neighborhood consolidation plan. We'll need you to keep this area clear." I told him to get his survey maps and his clipboard off my land before my dog decided he looked like a chew toy. He just shrugged, made a note, and walked back to his little hybrid car like he'd won something. I figured that was the end of it. Some new guy trying to throw his weight around. I was wrong. 2 days later, the sound of diesel engines woke me before the sun was even up. I looked out the kitchen window, and my heart dropped into my boots. 2 massive yellow bulldozers were rolling across my back field, their treads chewing up the grass I'd spent years tending. A crew of guys in hard hats were unloading equipment, and there, parked right in the middle of it all, was the HOA president's pearl-white SUV. Her name was Karen Withers, a woman who'd once tried to find me because my mailbox was, and I quote, "an unapproved shade of forest green." At first I was just angry. Then I saw what they were heading for. The big oak, the one my wife Jane and I planted the year we moved in. The one we sat under every summer evening. The one where her ashes were buried. I ran out there yelling, waving my arms like a crazy person. A foreman stepped in front of me, a big guy with a tired face. He told me to stand back, that they had permits for everything. Karen rolled down her window, not even bothering to get out. "It's for the good of the Zuri community, Ed," she called out. "A limited density rental expansion." I didn't hear anything else she said. All I could hear was the high whine of a chainsaw, and then the sickening crack as that beautiful old oak tree came crashing down. They didn't just mow it down. They ripped it out of the ground, roots and all, leaving a giant muddy scar right over the spot where I used to talk to my wife. They moved fast after that. Within a week, my backfield was a mess of rebar and concrete forms. They put up a chain-link fence that cut off access to my workshop, the one I built for my woodworking hobby. They blocked half my driveway with their construction trailers, forcing me to park on the street. I thought that was the worst of it. Then the letters started coming. Official HOA letterhead, fining me $142 a day. The reason? Violation of rental construction codes. They were fining me for the mess they were making on my own land. It was so insane, so backward I couldn't even wrap my head around it. I drove down to the county office with a shoebox full of my original deeds and property records. I'd kept everything, just like my father taught me. A woman at the counter looked through my papers, then at her computer, and just shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, not looking me in the eye. "The HOA presented clean paperwork. The parcel was rezoned. There's nothing we can do." Clean paperwork. It felt like a punch to the gut. Someone was lying, and the county was just rubber stamping it. I wasn't ready to give up. Linemen are stubborn people. You don't spend 40 years climbing poles in thunderstorms if you quit easily. I figured the one place they couldn't fake anything was the city zoning office, where the master records are kept. I drove over there the next morning, feeling a little spark of hope. I asked the clerk, a quiet woman named Dina, for the historical deeds and plats for my address. She tapped on her keyboard for a minute, her brow furrowed. She looked up at me, a flicker of something in her eyes. Pity, maybe. "That's odd," she said softly. Someone was just here last week and pulled all the original files for this parcel. My blood ran cold. Who? I asked. She shook her head. They just signed the log, but it's already been reclassified in the system, as of 2 months ago. Reclassified. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. It wasn't a mistake. This was planned. Someone had come in before me and buried the truth. The drive home was a blur. I didn't even turn on the radio. I just stared out at the road, the clerk's words echoing in my head. When I pulled up to my house, I couldn't bear to look at the construction site. I just walked past the ugly chain-link fence, past the torn-up earth where my workshop was now unreachable. I walked to the muddy hole where the oak used to stand. All that was left was the small, simple stone marker I'd put there for Jane. I knelt down, my old knees cracking in protest, and put my hand on the cool stone. I could almost feel her presence, the quiet strength she always had. I stayed there for a long time, the noise of the construction fading into a dull roar. "They want to build on you, Jane," I whispered, my voice thick. I took a deep breath, the smell of diesel and dirt filling my lungs. Guess we'll have to build back. The county office was a dead end, but I wasn't done. The next HOA meeting was on Tuesday night at the community clubhouse. I walked in there with my folder of original deeds under my arm, ready to have my say. I didn't even get past the doorway. Karen Withers was standing there with that clipboard goon, Tommy. She blocked my path with a perfectly manicured hand. "Ed," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "I'm afraid you can't be here. This meeting is for HOA members only." I held up my deed. "I've been a member since before this HOA even existed." She gave a little sigh, like she was explaining something to a child. "According to our records, you no longer own the parcel adjacent to the greenbelt. You're a non-resident now." The room was full of my neighbors, people I'd known for years. Some of them looked away, embarrassed. Others just stared. "That's a lie, and you know it," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "I never sold anything. I never signed anything." She smiled then, a tight, vicious little thing. "Oh, but you did. You donated the land during the Neighborhood Consolidation Initiative 12 months ago. It's all on file." Donated. The word was so absurd, so insulting, it almost knocked the wind out of me. I felt the blood rush to my face. Before I could say another word, Tommy stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave." I left. I wasn't going to get into a shouting match and give them an excuse to call the cops. But as I walked out into the cool night air, I felt a kind of cold rage settle over me. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. This was theft, wrapped in smiles and paperwork. The next morning, a certified letter was taped to my door. It was a notice that the HOA had placed a lien on my house for over $3,000 in unpaid fines. They were using the fines for the construction they were doing on my stolen land as an excuse to come after my home itself. I tried to talk to my neighbors, but it was like a wall had gone up. Most were too scared of the HOA to get involved. A few offered me their sympathy in whispers, but nobody wanted to stand with me. The final slap in the face came that Sunday. The local paper had a big, glossy article on the front of the lifestyle section. There was a picture of Karen Withers in a hard hat, pointing at a blueprint. The headline read, "Community First Initiative Brings Affordable Rentals to Oak Ridge." It was a glowing piece of propaganda, talking about the HOA's vision and generosity. It even quoted Karen saying, how grateful they were for the anonymous land donation that made it all possible. I crumpled the newspaper in my fist. They weren't just stealing from me, they were erasing me. That night, my son Jake pulled into the driveway. He was back from his last deployment with the Marines, trying to figure out what came next. He got out of his truck, saw the construction fence and the mess in the yard, and the look on his face went from tired to thunderous. I told him everything over a quiet dinner at the kitchen table. He just listened, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the floodlights illuminating the construction site out the window. When I was done, he just nodded slowly. "I'm staying, Dad," he said. "We'll fight them." I didn't want him getting dragged into this. He had enough of his own battles to fight, enough ghosts to quiet, but seeing him there, so solid and certain, it was the first time in weeks I didn't feel completely alone. We sat there for a while, just looking through old photo albums. There were pictures of me, 30 years younger, a lot more hair, digging the trenches for the utility lines. A picture of Jane, laughing as I nearly dropped a section of drywall. I pointed to one of me pouring the concrete for the foundation. I didn't get this far to hand it over to a bunch of clipboard cowboys, I told him, tapping the photo with my finger. They don't know what it means to build something. Later that night, long after Jake had gone to bed, I couldn't sleep. The low rumble of their generators was a constant reminder of what I'd lost. I went out to the workshop, or what was left of it. The part they hadn't fenced off was cluttered and dusty. I just stood there for a minute, breathing in the familiar smell of sawdust and oil. I felt beaten. They had the paperwork, the lawyers, the county on their side. They had the local paper telling everyone what a St. Karen Withers was. What did I have? A 30-year-old deed and a shoebox of receipts. It wasn't enough. My eyes landed on my old workbench, the one I built with my father. Underneath it, behind a stack of old paint cans, was a heavy gray metal lockbox. I hadn't opened it in years. I dragged it out, the metal scraping against the concrete floor. The key was exactly where I'd left it, hanging on a nail behind a calendar from 2012. My hand shook a little as I unlocked it. The lid creaked open. Inside, nestled in oilcloth, was a stack of papers. On top was a surveyor's map, rolled tight and tied with a string. It was drawn up by my old buddy Ronnie Hanlon 12 years ago, when the first whispers of this big HOA consolidation started. It was notarized, stamped, and dated, and beneath it was another document, a quiet land trust agreement. Ronnie had talked me into it, a just-in-case measure, a way to protect my land from exactly this kind of bureaucratic overreach. I had signed it, had it notarized, but I'd never actually recorded it with the county. It was my silent, invisible shield. I pulled the papers out, my heart starting to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I spread the old surveyor's map across the workbench. The lines were clear, the measurements precise. It showed, without a shadow of a doubt, where my property ended. My dog, Buster, padded into the workshop and nudged my hand with his cold nose, whining softly. I reached down and scratched him behind the ears. I looked from the map to the construction lights glaring through the window, and a slow grin spread across my face. I looked down at Buster. "They think they own it now," I whispered. "That's cute." The hope I found in that old lockbox faded fast. The next morning, the real war began. It wasn't just construction noise anymore. It was a full-scale invasion. They brought in generators that hummed and sputtered all night long, floodlights that burned through my bedroom curtains. My quiet life was over, replaced by the constant grind of machinery and the shouts of workers. Then the harassment got personal. It started with a knock on the door. It was Tommy Chalmers again, this time with a man from County Code Enforcement. They wanted to inspect my property for unauthorized structures. I knew what that meant. They were looking for a reason to find me for my own workshop, the one they'd already fenced off. I let them look. They spent an hour walking around my yard, measuring things, making notes on their clipboards. They couldn't find a single thing wrong, but that wasn't the point. The point was to make me feel powerless in my own home. A week later, my truck was gone. I came out one morning to go to the hardware store, and the spot where I'd parked it for 15 years was empty. I called the police, thinking it was stolen. The officer who showed up ran my plates and then gave me a tired look. "Sir, it was towed. An anonymous complaint was filed with the HOA about a vehicle leaking oil on the street. My truck doesn't leak oil. It never has. I had to pay $700 to get it out of the impound lot. A few days after that, my water pressure dropped to a trickle. I couldn't even take a decent shower. I called the water department, and they said there was no issue on their end. I knew what it was. The construction crew had probably accidentally nicked my water line while digging. When I tried to talk to the foreman, he just shrugged and said it wasn't his problem. The fence was the last straw. I woke up one morning and they had moved it again. Sometime in the middle of the night, they had uprooted the posts and shifted the entire fence line 10 feet closer to my house, swallowing up my vegetable garden. Jane had loved that garden. They were just gobbling up my life, piece by piece, and laughing while they did it. But they made a critical mistake. They thought because I was old, I was helpless. They didn't know that for 40 years, my job was to understand how the world was connected underground. I didn't just climb poles. I read the land. Every pole, every transformer box, every manhole cover tells a story. While they were playing their games, I started my own project. I dug out my old lineman's logs and every archived plat map I could find. I spent my days walking the perimeter, not of their new fence, but of my real property. I found the old iron stakes the original surveyors had hammered into the ground 100 years ago, hidden under brush and thyme. My son Jake helped me. He was quiet, methodical. He understood a mission. We used a simple measuring wheel and a compass, following the old maps. We found the markers one by one, a breadcrumb trail of truth. One afternoon, we were standing near the main road, right where the new rental development's entrance was being built. I pointed to a big weathered utility pole, the kind that holds a heavy transformer. "That pole right there," I told Jake. "I planted it in 1998. The county paid me for a 3-foot easement on my land to put it there, and it's still exactly where I left it." According to their new map, that pole was now 50 feet inside the HOA's grand new entrance. The land couldn't be in two places at once. The pole didn't lie. The paperwork had to be wrong. I started making regular trips down to the county archives, digging through dusty, forgotten records. The clerk, Dina, started recognizing me. I think she felt sorry for me. She'd quietly point me toward the right section, the forgotten cabinets where the pre-digital records were stored. My digging must have made Karen nervous. The HOA threw their annual summer barbecue, a big public event. I went, not for the cheap hot dogs, but to talk to some of the older neighbors. Before I could say a word, Karen got on the microphone to give her welcome speech. She saw me standing in the back of the crowd. She paused, a smirk playing on her lips. "I'd also like to take a moment to address some unfortunate rumors," she said into the mic, her voice booming across the park. "We have a certain individual who refuses to accept the new community boundaries. Some of you may have seen him wandering around with maps. Please understand, we are handling the situation. We have professionals dealing with this delusional squatter." The word hit me like a stone. A few people in the crowd, her little cronies, laughed. Delusional squatter, in front of everyone. I just turned and walked away. Humiliation is a cold fire. It burns away all the fear, all the doubt. It leaves nothing behind but purpose. That night, I made a phone call I should have made weeks ago. I called an old army buddy, a guy named Bulldozing, who'd been my sergeant. Bull was a land rights attorney now, one of the best and meanest in the state. I told him everything. He just listened. When I was done, he said, "Ed, find the first document ever filed on that land. Something between you and the county, before the developers, before the HOA. Find the original sin." The next day, I was back in the county archive basement with Dina. I told her what Bull said. She thought for a minute, then led me to a set of flat file drawers I'd never seen before. "These are the original county easements," she whispered, "before everything was rezoned." It took hours, but I found it. A single piece of yellowed, brittle paper, filed by a clerk with beautiful, looping handwriting. It was the original easement agreement between me and the county for that utility pole, dated May 1998. 6 months before the developers even broke ground on the first phase of the Oak Ridge subdivision. 6 months before the HOA even existed on paper. I stood there, holding that document, and the whole world shifted. My hands were shaking. I wasn't a delusional squatter. I was the original owner. "I never joined their HOA," I muttered, the words catching in my throat. "They built it around me." Bull Donovan, true to his name, was like a pit bull with a law degree. He said the easement was solid gold, a clear case of prior rights. He was confident he could shut down the construction and get my land back. But he wasn't cheap. The retainer alone was more than my Social Security check for a year. Legal fees were going to eat into my savings. It was a gamble. Every cent spent was one less cent for Jane's memorial, for Jake's future. The HOA, smelling blood, doubled down. They started targeting Jake. He was still jumpy, the memories of the war close to the surface. They started filing noise complaints, saying his truck was too loud. His music was disturbing the peace. They'd call the cops late at night, knowing the flashing lights would trigger his anxiety. The construction crews started parking their trucks right on my lawn, blocking access to my garage. They were trying to push us to the breaking point. Then, the real blow. The HOA filed for a fast-track civil ruling, claiming I was trespassing on their property. I didn't even get a chance to present my evidence. The judge, some young guy who probably got a Christmas card from Karen every year, granted a temporary injunction. I was locked out, legally barred from setting foot on the disputed land. The land I'd lived on for 30 years. I sat in my house, the noise of the construction a constant taunt. I could see them working out there, building their rental units, while I was powerless to stop them. They had won. I went out to the shed that evening. I hadn't been out there since they started building, since I had retrieved the land trust. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. It was hot, stuffy, the air thick with the smell of old wood and regret. Everything I'd ever worked for, everything Jane and I had built, was being taken away. I felt myself cracking. I pulled out a cardboard box filled with old paperwork, deeds, contracts, receipts, memories of a life that was slipping away. I started tearing them up, ripping them into shreds, the anger a burning knot in my gut. Then I grabbed a metal trash can and started a fire. As the flames licked at the edges of the paper, a single sheet slipped out of one of the folders and fluttered to the floor. I almost didn't notice it. I knelt down and picked it up, the paper warm to the touch. It was a copy of my original land trust document, the one Ronnie Hanlon had prepared all those years ago. But there was something else attached to it. A transfer of rights form, signed by the developer who had originally bought the land from the old family farm back when the Oak Ridge subdivision was first zoned. It stated in clear legal language that if the HOA failed to notify all adjacent landowners of any future zoning changes or construction plans, ownership of the disputed parcel would immediately default to the landowner in trust. The language was specific and decisive, designed, according to Bull, to cover any eventuality. A foolproof trap that never occurred to me to use. And then it hit me. They never told me, not once. Not when they bulldozed my tree, not when they filed their permits, not when they started building. They deliberately kept me in the dark. Their clean paperwork was a mountain of lies, built on a foundation of silence. My mind raced. They hadn't just stolen my land. They'd triggered a clause in the original land sale agreement, making their actions null and void, giving me even more rights than I thought I had. The fire in the trash can flickered and died down. I stood up slowly, the transfer of rights form clutched in my hand. My heart started beating again, stronger this time. I looked out at the construction site, the floodlights casting long shadows across the muddy ground. A slow grin spread across my face. "They never told me," I whispered. "That makes me the landlord." The phone call with Bull Donovan was short and brutal. I read him the clause from the developer's transfer agreement. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he let out a low whistle. "Ed," he said, his voice a low growl of pure professional joy. "They didn't just break the rules. They handed you the keys to the whole kingdom." He explained it to me in simple terms, lineman to lineman. We weren't just going to sue them for trespass. We were going to execute a power move so total, they wouldn't know what hit them. The first step was to move in silence. The next morning, Bull and I drove to the county courthouse. We weren't there to yell or protest. We were there to file paperwork. The first was a quiet title action. Bull called it a legal nuke. It's a lawsuit that asks a judge to officially clear up any confusion and declare, once and for all, who the rightful owner of a piece of property is. We attached my original deed, the old surveyor's map, the county easement from 1998, and the developer's transfer agreement with its golden little clause. It was an ironclad case, but that was only half of it. From the courtroom, we walked straight down to the Uvalde County Clerk's office. I said hello to Dina, who gave me a small, hopeful smile. I handed her the notarized land trust agreement from my lockbox, the one I'd sat on for 12 years. She took one look at it, saw the date, and her eyes went wide. She stamped it, recorded it, and just like that, a private just-in-case document became a public, undeniable fact. Bull explained the beautiful, simple math of it all on the drive home. "Because they never notified you," he said, tapping the dashboard for emphasis. "That clause you found was triggered. The moment they broke ground, ownership of that parcel, under the terms of the original sale, defaulted to you, to the trust. And Ed, here's the kicker." He paused, letting the moment hang in the air. "Ownership of the land includes anything permanently attached to it. They built 67 rental homes on your land, Ed, without a contract, without your permission. That means those houses, they're yours." I just stared out the window, the world sliding by in a blur. I wasn't just getting my backfield back, I was getting everything they had built on it, all of it. The next few days were a blur of more paperwork. We drew up liens, legal claims, against all 67 of the new rental units. Bull explained it as putting a boot on a car. The HOA couldn't sell them, couldn't rent them, couldn't do a thing with them until my claim was settled. I signed 67 separate forms, one for each house they'd built over my wife's memory. Then we sent out the cease and desist letters, certified mail, return receipt requested. One to Karen Withers at the HOA office, and one to the main office of the construction company. It was a formal order to stop all work immediately on my private property. Of course, they ignored it. I saw the mailman deliver the letter to the construction foreman. He signed for it, ripped it open, read it, and then laughed. He crumpled it up and threw it in a trash barrel. The work continued, faster than before. They were trying to get the project finished, thinking they could just pay me off later. They thought I was still just some old man they could bully with court delays. They were operating on old information. They had no idea the ground had shifted under their feet. The letter I was waiting for arrived a week later. It wasn't from the HOA. It was a simple, boring-looking envelope from the county assessor's office. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an official notice of change in ownership for Parcel 7B. The old owner listed was the Oak Ridge HOA. The new owner, effective immediately, was the Edward Rowe Land Trust. They had processed our filing. It was done. The government, the same one that told me they couldn't help, had now officially recognized me as the sole legal owner. That afternoon, I went to the hardware store and bought a brand new bright yellow hard hat. Then, I walked out my back door. I walked right past the no trespassing sign, past the fence they had put up too. Keep me out. I was no longer a trespasser. They were. I walked onto the site, the mud sucking at my boots. The foreman, the same guy who'd laughed at my letter, saw me coming. "Hey, old man," he yelled over the sound of a nail gun. "You're not supposed to be here. The judge said so." I just kept walking until I was standing right in front of him. "That ruling was based on incorrect ownership records," I said calmly. "These records have now been corrected. You and your men are trespassing. I need you to stop all work and vacate my property." He stared at me for a second, then threw his head back and roared with laughter. A few of his crew members snickered along with him. "You hear that, boys? The delusional squatter thinks he owns the place now." I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded slowly and looked around at the half-finished houses, the stacks of lumber, the heavy machinery. "Good," I said, my voice flat and even. "That makes this your first official day of back rent." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I handed it to him. It was an invoice, addressed to the HOA and the construction company. It was for accrued rent, unauthorized use of private land, destruction of property, and illegal resource connection, retroactive to the day they mowed down my oak tree. The total at the bottom was $1,270,000. The foreman's laughter died in his throat. He looked from the invoice to my face to the hard hat on my head. The color drained from his face. The snickering from his crew stopped. The only sound left was the wind whistling through the skeletons of my 67 new houses. The next monthly HOA meeting was scheduled for a Thursday night. This was it. This was the stage. My son Jake, ever the Marine, called it the counter-offensive. I just called it setting the record straight. We got there a half hour early. The community clubhouse was already filling up with the usual faces. Jake set up a small, discreet camera on a tripod in the back corner of the room, pointing it right at the podium. He said it was for our own records. I knew it was to make sure no one could lie about what was about to happen. I took a seat in the front row, a simple manila folder resting on my lap. A few minutes later, a county sheriff's deputy walked in. He was a tall man with a calm, professional demeanor. He didn't look at me, but he took up a position near the back wall, just observing. His presence alone changed the air in the room. People started whispering, looking around, wondering what was going on. Then Karen Withers walked in, flanked by Tommy Chalmers and the rest of the board. She was wearing a crisp blazer, a picture of corporate authority. She saw me, her eyes narrowed for a split second, and then her practiced plastic smile snapped back into place. She completely ignored the deputy in the back. She tapped the microphone, the feedback squealing for a moment. "Good evening, everyone. Let's call the monthly meeting of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association to order." She started with the usual boring business, minutes from the last meeting, the treasurer's report. Then she paused, her eyes locking on me. "Before we move on to new business," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "it seems we have a non-resident in attendance. Mr. Rowe, I believe you were informed that you are no longer welcome at these meetings. In fact, you are currently trespassing." The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me. I didn't move. Tommy Chalmers puffed out his chest and took a step toward me. "Sir, you need to leave now, or we will have you removed." This was the moment. I stood up slowly, my old bones creaking a little. I walked to the podium, placing my manila folder on the lectern next to her. She looked at the folder, then at me, a flicker of genuine annoyance in her eyes. "This is not a public forum, Ed." I leaned into the microphone. My voice was calm and steady, but it carried through the silent room. "You're right," I said. "This isn't a public forum. It's a meeting for the residents of Oak Ridge, and I'm here tonight as the newest and largest landowner in this community." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Delusional," as I said. I opened the folder. I pulled out the first document and laid it on the lectern for all to see. "This," I said, my voice clear and strong, "is the newly recorded and updated deed for Parcel 7B, filed last week with the county assessor. As you can see, the owner is listed as the Edward Rowe Land Trust." I pulled out another paper. "This is my notarized surveyor's map from 12 years ago, which confirms the original property lines." Then came the last one. "And this is the transfer of rights agreement from the original developer, stating that if the HOA fails to notify an adjacent landowner of zoning changes, ownership defaults. You never notified me, Karen." Her smile was gone. Her face was a pale, tight mask of confusion and fury. "This is absurd," she stammered. This is fake." "Is it?" I asked. Just then, a laptop on the table next to the podium sprang to life. Bull Donovan's face appeared on the screen via a Zoom call Jake had quietly set up. His voice, deep and commanding, filled the room. "Karen Withers," Bull said, his eyes like steel. "My name is William Donovan. I represent Mr. Rowe. Every document he has presented is legal, filed, and binding. Your client, the Oak Ridge HOA, has knowingly engaged in illegal construction of 67 structures on private land owned by my client." The room erupted in gasps and shouts. Karen stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She looked wildly around the room, looking for an ally, for someone to stop this nightmare. Her eyes landed on the deputy in the back. "Officer," she shrieked, "this man is harassing me. He's trespassing. I want him arrested." The deputy didn't move toward me. Instead, he started walking slowly toward the podium, a set of folded papers in his hand. He walked right past me and stopped in front of a stunned Karen Withers. "Ma'am," he said, his voice polite but firm, "are you Karen Withers?" She just nodded, speechless. "You've been served." He handed her the papers, a court summons. The crowd fell silent again, straining to read the words on the top sheet. I knew what they said: civil trespass, illegal construction, fraud. Tommy Chalmers, who had been frozen in place, took one look at the summons in Karen's trembling hand, turned white as a sheet, and quickly sat down, trying to disappear into his chair. Two other board members immediately stood up and started whispering frantically to each other. One of them took off his HOA name badge and set it on the table. The foundation was crumbling. The room had completely turned. People were standing up now, yelling questions at the board. "Is this true? Did you use our dues for this? You lied to us." Karen just stood there, clutching the summons, her face a ruin of public humiliation. I stepped back to the microphone, letting the noise die down a little. "There's one more piece of business," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "As the legal owner of the land and the 67 rental units currently occupying it, I've decided to be a good neighbor." I looked directly at the stunned faces of my neighbors. "Instead of tearing them down, I will be offering them for rent at market value." I let that sink in for a moment. Then I turned my gaze back to the shell-shocked board. "All rental income will, of course, be paid directly to me. Your first invoice for project management fees is in the mail, or you can vacate the premises. The choice is yours." For a full second, there was dead silence. Then someone in the back of the room started clapping. Another person joined in. then a few more. Within seconds, the entire room, save for the terrified board members, was cheering. They were cheering for the underdog, for the guy who fought back, for the man who had just dismantled the petty tyrant who had been making their lives miserable for years. Karen looked at the crowd, her face twisted in disbelief. Then she looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. Without another word, she turned and fled from the podium, pushing her way through the jeering crowd and out the clubhouse doors. A chorus of "Boo!" followed her into the night. I stood there, under the fluorescent lights, the cheers of my neighbors washing over me. I had my land back, and so much more. Justice wasn't just served, it was delivered, special delivery, right to her doorstep. The chaos after that meeting was something to see. Karen Withers was gone the next day. Her pearl-white SUV was packed before sunrise, and she disappeared without a word to anyone. The court later ordered her to issue a formal, public apology in the local paper, a little block of text buried in the classifieds, but by then, she was just a ghost. The rest of the HOA board fell apart. 3 of them resigned on the spot that night. Tommy Chalmers, the clipboard goon, tried to hang on, but people just laughed at him in the grocery store until he finally put his house up for sale. The HOA, or what was left of it, was terrified. Their lawyers called Bull Donovan the very next morning, ready to make a deal. There wasn't much to negotiate. They were caught dead to rights, and they knew it. Bull was merciless. He made sure the settlement covered every cent of my legal fees. They had to pay back the $700 for towing my truck. They had to refund every last dollar of the bogus fines they'd levied against me, with interest. And then came the damages. For the harassment, for the emotional distress, for the destruction of my property. The final number was staggering. Their insurance company had to cut a check so big, it probably gave their CEO a heart attack. The lien on my house vanished like it never existed. I was made whole again, and then some. The construction crew showed up the following Monday, looking nervous. The foreman who'd laughed in my face came to my door, hat in hand. He said they were ready to pack up and leave. "Not so fast," I told him. "You're not done yet. You just have a new boss." I hired them to finish the job, but to my standards this time. My standards were a lot higher than the HOA's. I paid them a fair wage, on time, every week. Jake helped me manage the project, his military logistics experience making him a natural. We made sure every wire was pulled correctly, every pipe was sealed tight, and every foundation was sound. Within a few months, all 67 homes were finished. They were nice little places, perfect for young families or retirees, and they were all mine. My tenants were good people, happy to find a decent place to live without a nightmare HOA breathing down their necks. They paid their rent on time, and I kept the properties in perfect shape. There were no surprise inspections, no fines for having the wrong color flowers. Just respect. The first rent check started rolling in, and I knew exactly what to do with the money. I didn't buy a new truck or go on a fancy vacation. I called the best landscape nursery in the state. I had them deliver 10 strong, healthy young oak saplings. I hired a crew to help me plant them, creating a small grove right where the old one used to stand. We brought in fresh soil and laid new sod, erasing the ugly scar the bulldozers had left behind. In the middle of the new trees, I placed a simple granite bench. On it, a small bronze plaque reads, "Jane's Corner." I go there every morning now, with my coffee and my dog, and sit on that bench. It's quiet again. The trees are small, but they're growing. With the land healed, I turned my attention to the shed. Now that I could finally get to it, I cleaned it out, top to bottom. Jake had an idea. He said a lot of the local vets he knew were like him, good with their hands, but needing a quiet place to work, a mission. So that's what we built. We turned my old workshop into a fully equipped veteran wood shop. We filled it with saws, lathes, and sanders. Any veteran in the county can come use it, free of charge. We call it a union-free tool library, a place to build things, to fix things, to find a little peace in the grain of a piece of wood. The neighborhood is different now, too. A new HOA board was elected, made up of good people who actually care about the community. They came to me, believe it or not, and asked for my help rewriting the bylaws. We put in clear rules that protected homeowners, not bullied them. We put limits on fines and ended the vague nonsense that let people like Karen run wild. The fear is gone. People wave when I drive by. They stop to chat over the fence. They thank me for standing up. It turns out, most folks just want to be left alone to live their lives. So, this is my life now. Most mornings, you can find me right here on my porch, sitting in my old rocking chair with Buster at my feet. I look out over my yard, past Jane's corner, to the 67 neat little houses that line the streets beyond. I watch families come and go. I see kids riding their bikes. It's peaceful. My mailbox, the one Karen once threatened to find me over, is full these days. Not with warnings or violations, but with rent checks. Every single one of them is a reminder. They built on my land without asking. Now I let them stay, but I send the invoice.